I find Exodus 4 to be an important chapter in the Hebrew Bible for its simple advice relating to self-confidence problems, specifically regarding religion and discussing it. It's very practical that we have to have a community of real people where we means myself and of course others. In order to do that, religion has to be discussed, right? And religion is going to be kind of cringe. It's going to be very cringe or weird in most people's eyes. People aren't going to want to talk about it, let alone approach it with rigor, seriousness that it deserves, unless you're in the clergy. And the clergy are weird. They dress different. There's just something different about them, just on an aesthetic level. Which isn't good for a people and a race as a whole, right? To kind of lose this connection with your spirituality and your ancestors, your religion. Something like Christianity is not tied into any specific race. It's a universal religion. So therefore, right, that it's going to disconnect you unless you have something that relates to your ancestors. I like Exodus 4 for being explicit about this, that Moses, he worries, what if they don't believe me, right? Which, fair enough. Or it's probably the fairest of questions. Or what you would want out of some kind of leader, especially a spiritual leader, to really wrestle with God, even upset him if he has to, with arrogance and your naivety, and just a sense of genuineness, right? That Moses really doesn't know what to do, right? And of course, he kind of upsets God about that. God says you have to do it. But like everything in the Bible, there's more than just this kind of surface level analysis, and it often comes in parables. Like in Exodus 4 with the 3 signs from God, because, well, Moses, he's like me. He's how I feel, or any young person, not just me, that you're unsure about religion. Not just religion, but a lot of things in life, and that we need something. We require something that's going to help us, guide us, that to keep us from just going through your head, right? That you got to have some action at some point. It's personal, but again, it's communal at the end. So that's the problem, right? How do we connect those two? That said, reading Exodus 4, in particular, right, we begin with Moses' staff, where the first sign that God gives Moses, that he turns his shepherd's staff into a snake after he threw it on the ground, and then when he picks it back up again, it turns again into the rod or the staff. So my interpretation is that Moses is dealing with this kind of recursive nature of the universe, or God, right? If God created everything, then he's the universe. The snake is like this wave or this circular, this kind of like self-referential tendency in the universe, or even religion, right? This is where it gets kind of kooky, that they might go, ay, or something. Then you keep saying the same things over and over, and they think you might be messing with them. And then the staff is kind of this more linear object, continuous, that we could grab onto it. It's a solid object that again, in quantum mechanics, the theory basically of how atoms are modeled, right? Like the hydrogen atom is you do these kind of recursive equations, or you equate things because you say that nature is recursive. That said, nature is not truly recursive in that or to our eyes, right, to how we observe it, in that we usually look to find roots right? So in the text, as an analogy, Moses grabs the snake by the tail, right? Religion is needed to explain the least probable or highly unlikely events that sometimes produce catastrophes like a flood, a volcano, or earthquake. So you're most likely going to look for roots and symptoms and things like that instead of these kind of particular solutions. Although, right, something like the weather, we can predict the weather with fairly accurate results for the next day or the week. But can you say when there's going to be a flood or volcano or an earthquake with certainty? No, you're going to say that there's going to be probabilities, and you're going to give, even something with an earthquake is highly unpredictable. You're just going to have to build buildings that can withstand these kind of limits. So furthermore, I argue that the rod and snake is like Rodriguez, in particular, like the Spanish surname. just personally for myself. And for other nationalities, you can find an analog, right? That Rodriguez is a European surname, so you could just find an analog. The rod in Rodriguez is obvious, right? It's the staff of Moses. In the Rodriguez, like the suffix is a ring or curved earth. In Greek, rod is rabados. So maybe it's something like a rabbit or rabbi, and then the earth, of course, is geos, right? Geometry, geography. Geo is earth. So again, Rodriguez is like rod and ring, or rod and snake. It's not too far-fetched, I think, to interpret Exodus 4 in this manner. So it's, right, no pun intended, of course, but that's I think is a fair kind of interpretation. Moving on, so Moses' hand. The problem with religion, again, is that it's kooky. But it's also fundamental in that everyone is going to wonder why they're alive at some point, and they're going to want to know what the purpose of that life is. When Moses puts his hand into his sleeve and it turns white and then back to the skin color, he has to go beyond the pale to the spiritual, and then the problem he faces, he has to make it real. He has to kind of make this weird thing that happened real, and he's worried about it. How do I explain this weird shit that's happened to me? Right? It's so kooky, but also it kind of, well, that's the reality, right? That you're going to be dealing with snake charmers and these kind of black magic types of mystics for a religion. It's going to be, you're telling it stories about monsters and animals. So moving on, the third sign of God is to pour the water of the river onto dry land, and it will become like blood. And then there could be, again, multiple interpretations for this. The crossing of the Red Sea as one, that Moses himself is drawn out of the water, and that's why he's called Moses. Moreover, that humans are viscoelastic. We are solid on land, but also able to go in the water and move about. I mean, humans are 70% water, right? So it makes sense that we kind of have kind of these that we necessitate water. That water is a lifeline, or it sustains our bloodlines. Moreover, that water, right, of course, is necessary for life, so it makes sense to be around it for practical civilizational sense. It's a fundamental pillar of any city or state. And then also fresh water religiously is as sacred as blood in both the Homeric and Hebrew traditions, as well as the Christian traditions like baptisms and such. Of course, necessity is always the root of evil. If we need religion, then you need to make it yours. You need to own it. It has to be real and about yourself. And it's as much as we depend on it like water, right? It's not going to be a want, it's a need. So the water gives shape. When it mixes with land, it can make clay. You can construct houses, storage facilities. You write laws on tablets. Basically, it allows for civilization. In the Jewish sense, God creates man out of dust in his breath. And something like Moses, right, that he comes from the water and the basket's covered in tar. It's kind of this earthy material. So the Jewish interpretation is that God does something, and then we're going to try to understand it or provide this kind of language for it. Not that, and it's not like the other way, right, that you would say something and then God does it, or we sacrifice and then God does something because of that. That God is everything, but he's also simple. In a lot of cases, God can be understood, whether through these kind of myths, or as today mostly we know science, right, which improves a group of people's chances of surviving, right? If you can predict the weather, or you understand that you need water, and then if you understand kind of how water, like the mechanics of water and such, you could start to predict the behavior of rivers and kind of more probability of what river would be best to live by and such, right? Geographies born out of this kind of thinking. Which brings me to the next verse with Aaron, who is like Nestor in the Iliad, right? So if you like Homer, then you'll say Aaron can be equated with Nestor. These are similar figures. They're these necessary, legitimizing figures. The sweet talker, the need to find the words, the need to find the fresh water, and it allows you to sustain the bloodline. Again, the Jewish religion holds fresh water of a river sacred, right? So it's ironic, right? Or maybe it's not ironic, right, that the Nile is kind of, we understand it's probably like nihilism, and that we need religion, or that Moses is needed to kind of draw the Hebrews out of nihilism, or out of the Nile, out of Egypt, to cohere them into this defined group, right? Jewish people. And in particular, Aaron is Moses' brother. They're both Levites. And Aaron is appointed by God to bring the words to Moses. Because Moses, well, he's not well spoken. Maybe I think he's like Joe Biden, right? He's prone to goffs. And again, Aaron is like the eldest. And again, he's like Nestor from the Iliad. And then Moses, maybe he's a man, but not as old as Aaron, who's like the mentor that legitimizes Moses in the eyes of the elders of Israel, to give Moses some clout. Because Moses, well, he's worried about being believed, like all younger people. There's self-confidence issues at heart there. So Aaron is going to meet him halfway, or he's going to meet him. And that we already know how to talk, right? Nobody needs to know how to talk, especially to our elders. We all have parents or older brothers, or just people in our jobs or our life that have some standing in society. And we want credibility from those people. We want to be seen as peers. But then think about spirituality, right? Do we really know how to talk about that kind of thing? That we need somebody to patch that up, or to be the media there, right? We need somebody kind of to interface with the media, or Aaron, this kind of legitimizing person to the elders, but also somebody who can say, or, well, Moses is going to be the leader, right? That you need somebody who's going to lead, but then you need somebody to kind of patch up. Maybe he's made a golf or something, right? Do we understand if Joe Biden says something like CBS or NBC is going to go out there and probably run some cover for him? It's necessary to continue on to the traditions and customs to sustain civilization in a race, right? That it needs to be passed down. And also there's kind of this blood or genetic component to it, but also the spiritual, right? And when I say spirit, I mean you can't have eyes on the back of your head. So you need delegates, or you need children to pass the legacy down to. You need people almost as good as you, yourself, to trust, right? So, well, when Moses, this is kind of like Moses, he leaves Egypt, and then, well, the Lord says that he says to say that, let go of my son, and then if he doesn't refuse to let go of him, he might kill him, even if it's the firstborn, right? And then, well, his wife circumcises, right? It's kind of this weird circumstance or something, that she throws it down on the ground, right? And he says, oh, that now he's the root, right? That he has a first son. Again, like this kind of recursive nature, but it's not so perfect. It's not like a perfect sequence and stuff how we expect it. That we might think life is somewhat determined, but in reality, it's quite unexpected, and that we shouldn't worry so much about it, and that we should just let God do his thing, and then we'll write about it, what happens, right? And then people will believe it, because, well, after some time, we'll have a better understanding of God, and we'll be able to predict, or we'll have become what they would say for the prophet, right? Like much as a weatherman makes some money, right? They take home a salary. And what do we all want in life? Well, we want validation from our fathers or mothers or any other that is respected in society. Most want power, or pretty much everyone wants power, just whether we're willing to admit it or not. We want power over ourselves first, but that is in order to have control over others, right? So that's like a religion. We feel we are chosen to do it, or a right? We have a right to do it because we're better. And then more than that, it's necessary. So, and then it's kind of weird to think about, but also that the fringes, right? So then Moses grabs the tail, and he's kind of an outlaw, and he goes out into the wilderness on these fringes, right? But it's these outlaws or fringe people that are going to kind of go be attracted to religion, right? So why do prisoners and drug addicts turn out religious a lot of times? Well, it allows them to create something where there was nothing, right? There's kind of these wealth of words that they're down on their luck. They've probably burned some bridges, or they have no credibility. You can't just go to an interview and tell somebody you've been in jail for 5 years and expect them to hire you as the CEO. Right, so through some merit, one is able to gain credibility and the skills necessary to become kind of this vocal spiritual leader in a community. So it's kind of necessary that the people who are going to do this have gone down all these kind of different paths that normal people haven't traversed, and they're able to come back and provide the morality or the reasons why the herd or the normal people shouldn't stray that way, right? They shouldn't follow us in that sense, but they should follow us in that they shouldn't go that way, right?